Good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here again. I want to thank the organization, Link Asia. It's a very good organization. It's quite difficult to do it, and I want to thank Agromed for the invitation. So we're going to speak about accurate nutrition. Accurate nutrition is next step of nutrition is the way we want to go in order to save some nutrients and achieve the genetic potential. Always looking, and insist, always looking for the lowest cost. Achieve the genetic potential with the lowest feeding cost. So that means a lot of accuracy everywhere. So that means for our industry, for farms, a lot of steps to do. And of course, at the beginning, I want to insist, accurate nutrition is not the first things to do on the farm. Of course, management is always the first one. Housing, let's say health protection. When you achieve those, then you can focus on accurate nutrition. It's never the first step to achieve, of course. So it's a lot of accuracy. And accuracy in the raw material description, first step. Accuracy in the storage and sometimes segregation, when you have one important raw material that you need to separate into two, because some of the nutrients are too different, especially speaking about protein. Accuracy in the processing, something we already spoke this morning, very important. The type of milling, the accuracy, the regularity, the type of mixing, all the steps in the factory that will lead to regularity. Of course, more accuracy in the knowledge. So we are learning every day about requirement for animal, specific requirement in specific period in the cycle. Okay? Accuracy in the farm, and sometimes it's a more difficult step to pass. How to provide more feeds with accuracy in the quantity, in the period, how to weight the animal to be able to shape with requirement, okay? And at the last, accuracy in the management and organization in the farm. So a lot of accuracy. Accurate nutrition must be a balance always about economical benefits, what are the return or on investment, and what are the cost of accuracy. We can be very accurate, then it costs go too high, so no sense. So it's a way to find the right balance between this cost of accuracy and globally the economical benefits we can find out on the animal. So it's always a matter of balance, but depending on the age, depending on in the cycle of the soil, for example, the period, we need to be able to compare what are the requirements, okay, the needs, and what should come from the feed. And whenever we have more as a requirement that in the feed, so we will not achieve the genetic potential. It's as simple as this. And at the opposite, when the feed provide more nutrient than required, so we are providing wastes. Okay? So the nutritionist has to be able to face a lot of constraint, a lot of information in order to be able to face maintenance requirement, growth requirement, and now we also have to face health and welfare from the feed. And in the past, it was sufficient to focus on, let's say, nutrition. And now, again, focusing on this microbiota, we are able to also improve health and welfare from our diet. So the tools that the nutritionist can use, must use, usually use, is we have the main here. The previous speaker showed us formulation. So in formulation, it's always the same. We have some nutrient. And in those nutrients, we have one that is becoming more and more important, and was very happy from this morning. We spoke a lot about fiber. And when I began, fiber was not that important. It was maybe the nutrient, let's say, the more complicated to achieve, and probably the one that we didn't focus a lot. And now fiber is as important as protein, as energy. We need to focus on this, mainly to be able to balance this gut health, which is not that easy. We have a lot of constraint playing on the gut health. And from this well-balanced microbiota, then we can achieve better performance. This gut health is at the basic of performance for animals. And fiber, we will focus in this presentation on fiber, how from this accurate nutrition, we also need to be accurate in the fiber composition. So accurate nutrition is the right nutrient at the right period, at the right quantity, for the right animal or an homogeneous group of animals. So if we focus on source, let's say that's something which is already done. It's not the highest accuracy in the feed program. It is something which is already done in our farms. We mixed several types of feed, but also with some farm pack that are able in a short period to correct the global profile of the diet. We already spoke this morning of the high importance of the specific feed for gilts. The gilt preparation is becoming more and more important. You invest on the gilts, the cost is high, and the gilts is the future of the farm. So this first part is important. First month of gestation, we have so specific requirement is the same. Second month of gestation, we can also have a specific feed, the same for the third part, pre-farrowing. And now we have two different lactation feed. This is, for me, the first step, accuracy. With those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 feed, we are already quite close to specific requirement. And if we have a look to the nutrient requirement during this gestation, for example, it's not a constant one. It's a dynamic one. What does it mean? It means that only modulating the quantity will not be able to reach the accurate value we are looking for. Okay, so in this kind of program, which is again the first step, we have low waste of nutrient, but we are also able to be very close to the requirement. That means no lack or low lack of nutrient. Okay, in this case, we can look for, of course, so longevity, but in the same time, we can decrease the piglet cost, but not only. Piglet cost is one factor, is maybe not the more important. Piglet quality, together, they are important. Okay, for the feed of from piglet to fatteners, this is also for us something quite usual. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different feed, and it's the same. because it's again a dynamic evolution of nutrient. We cannot achieve those with lowest level of a feed with accuracy. Okay, so it's not easy to organize a farm to be able to distribute that number of feed, but most of the time when you do this, and if homogeneity in the pen are okay, you save money. Just one example, typical example. Okay, from 20 kilo till a slaughterhouse, if you have 2 feeds, compare to 5 feeds. And here is a global theoretical requirement. So easy to see with 2 feed. If you want to cover the requirement, okay, here you have wastes. You invest on more requirement than needed. But in the same time, especially at this period, it's also more risk. Speaking about protein, this period is a risky one. So when you achieve this, it's a little bit more risky. Waste of money and more risk. So 5 feed are closer to the requirement. Again, if your homogeneity in the pen is good enough. So that is, globally speaking, accurate nutrition. And now a lot of money is putting in the research to be able, in the farm, to distribute, let's say, specific feed at specific period. In this accurate nutrition, we must speak about fiber. Fiber should and must be controlled in this accurate nutrition. But fiber, what for? Why should we focus? Why should we control the fiber composition? So fiber is a quite complex family. It's, again, all fibers are, let's say, a kind of network mixed with protein, mixed with different kind of fiber. It's not that simple. And we already can understand why particle size is so important, just in order to get the global property of the fiber. Just speaking about this kind of network organization. So let's say the global description of fiber is quite accurate. Okay, fiber is part of the dietary carbohydrates. We have the dietary fiber coming from lignin to resistant starch. And we already spoke about this morning. The fiber description today is not accurate enough. We still have a lack in the description to be able first to have a good physical description, which is the first step, and secondly, to be able to predict, to control the functional property. And it has already been said today, crude fiber, which is a more common nutrient to speak about fiber, crude fiber is a very bad friend. It's very good to describe lignin, cellulose, a little bit of insoluble hemicellulose, but that's it. It's impossible to describe, okay, the global fiber composition focusing on crude fiber. A lot of mistakes are done focusing on crude fiber. ADF, NDF, a little bit more accurate, but not enough. Again, not enough. Soluble and insoluble is probably today the more accurate one. It's not perfect, but it's probably the more accurate one. It's the one we are using, waiting for something maybe more accurate and maybe more involved, again, in the functional property of fiber. Just, again, to insist a little bit on the crude fiber, just one example to show you how it could be so makes so high mistakes coming from this criteria. We take two raw material, alfalfa, sugar beet pulp. Speaking about crude fiber, almost the same. That means in the software, on your software, if you only focus on crude fiber, those two types of diet or those two types of raw material, your software will say it's the same. If you look at the animal, very practically, you go in the farm and you check the feces quality. Because insoluble and soluble are completely different. Speaking about quantity, but also speaking about the balance between those two parts, those two fractions of fiber, you will have completely different impact on behavior, on feces weight, just because crude fiber is not expressing what is the global composition of fiber. Okay, so today, two ways to describe the fiber composition. The first one is matrix description, and probably today's more accurate is still soluble and insoluble, but in the same time, because it's not sufficient, and I really insist, it's not sufficient, we have to have a good knowledge about the raw material, functional ingredient, specific one, in order to put minimum and maximum, in order to control, and sometimes in order to force some raw material to enter the formulation, because we know that we will have specific impact, specific benefits from those fiber. And those two must be done together. Okay, so it's a complex, quite complex area, especially with, let's say, classical raw material providing fibers. Always, it's very important to have a good quality control, but because of the huge variability, for example, of wheat bran, because of this high variability, and because sometimes you only have one silo to store this product, okay, you can understand that the variability in front of the animal will be high. First. Secondly, very important to focus on the physical preparation. And for fibers, for example, for piglet, steam preparation could be important for soluble one. And the particle size is also very important. I really insist on this. For me, it's the basic. Before speaking about very, very accurate nutrition, this is mixing, milling. It's a really basic. We need to be able to have the right balance between soluble and insolubles. This coming from experience. And now, always we are speaking about the fiber strategy. What does it mean? It means that one fiber will not be able to cover the requirement. You must have a global strategy with fiber. It will be first a way to reduce variability, okay, and a second part, a way to achieve the global equilibrium. Okay, so depending on physical stage, we will not have the same impact, so we will not have the same requirement for fiber. But also fiber are completely dependent on the, let's say, chemical composition of the and for example, especially oxygen content, pH level, water content. So in a few minutes, if we focus on fiber, we can describe five main properties of fiber. Let's say physical impact, chemical impact, microbiota impact, behavior impact, and health impact. And all of those will be applied during the cycle of the animal, speaking about sows, but during the life of the piglet, independently or together, in order to be able to face the requirement and the objective we get. Physical impact. For fibers, this is something very important. Okay, maybe the first one is water holding, water binding capacity. This capacity to keep the water on, let's say, not that strong binding. And this water will be quietly available for fermentation also. So this water holding capacity is very important. Another one, we spoke about ulcers this morning, wall motion. Okay? Again, this balance between soluble and insoluble, particle size done on the fiber will completely have a positive impact on the wall motion. Viscosity, of course. Gastric and intestine distension. That's something that we play on before the lactation period in order to increase a little bit the feed intake. Feces weight. Okay, we spoke this morning about constipation. That's obvious coming from the right balance of fiber and from the right microbiota. Chemical impact. Using fiber, we can change, you can modulate, we can increase the acid secretion in the stomach. And for piglets, this is something that is needed. The immature piglets, the level of pH in the stomach is too low, leading to a poor digestibility of the protein. Using the right level of fiber is a way to decrease this pH and give a better result on this protein, let's say, digestion. Fermentation, of course, short-chain fatty acid production, globally in the large intestine, but some of them can occur in the small intestine, last part of the small intestine, leading to decrease in the pH on the large intestine and a little bit in the small intestine, leading to, and so important, an increase from the caliciform cells of the mucus and mucin production, okay, which is the first level, the first layer for the gut barrier. Impact on the microbiota. So when you use fiber, if you choose the right fiber composition, you will be able to feed the right population of bacteria in the gut. So that's one way. It's not the only one. It's part of a global strategy. It's one way to achieve this microbiota balance. And it's probably the more important one. Huh? So then, using the right balance of a fiber, you will increase the global diversity of this microbiota. That means more family of bacteria inside. Okay? And from this diversity will come all the positive metabolite and control in the negative metabolite. Another way is when you use the right balance of fiber, you can change, you can play on the retention time in the stomach. That means maybe you can play on increasing the digestibility of the protein. Better digestibility of the protein, the proteolytic bacteria will have less protein to use. So a way to protect this microbiota. Limit aerobic bacterial proliferation, because it's a kind of competition for nutrients, competition for everything in this gut. So when you fed the right population, Ruminococcus, Fibrobacter, this kind of cellulolytic population, you will help them to develop, you will help them to grow, and then we'll have all the benefits mainly on health. Important also, and now we are even speaking about irritability of the microbiota of the source to the piglet, to the litter. It's a way, and when you want to get rid of antibiotic or decrease antibiotic, this is a very important step. It's a way to achieve the first right contamination of your piglet. One day after farrowing, depending on the quality of the feces, not only, but it's part of the things, you can fix this microbiota in the piglet. Control the proteolytic fermentation, also something important. Using the right balance and the right functionality of fiber, you can limit the proteolytic fermentation. Okay, so I really think for a nutritionist, we should consider two main populations. Maybe it's very simplist, but most of the time, simple things are maybe easier to achieve. We need to focus on two populations. The first one, the proteolytic bacteria. That will lead to proteolytic fermentation. Okay? And the second one is maybe the weakest. It's a very weak population, anaerobic one, the cellulolytic population. These kind of bacteria that are able to use fermentable fiber in order, through a cross metabolic feeding, in order to promote and to produce the short chain fatty acid. Okay, so protein can lead to branch short chain fatty acid, phenol, andol, amine, which are very fastly, let's say, check with the sensor we have in the epithelium, close to the epithelium cells linked to the dendritic cells, and then leading to inflammation. And on the balance, the fermentable fiber can lead to lactate, propionate, acetate, and sometimes, if you make the right choice in your fiber source, butyrate. Those two to show you how, depending on your choice of fiber, you can influence the proteolytic fermentation. In the first one, you see that using, let's say, classical raw material that can provide, let's say, fiber, okay, you will improve the production of short chain fatty acid. Okay. In the second one, looking at the ammoniac concentration, just to show you that all fiber are not equal, and depending on the choice of fiber you are doing, look at this one. This one will completely reduce the ammoniac concentration. So all fiber are not equal. That's why when I was speaking about soluble, insoluble, it's a first step. It's not enough. It is not enough. What's happened when you use fiber? Not that high level, quite low level, but accurate, will provide a change in the nitrogen composition. You will find more. It will switch from a urinary nitrogen to a fecal one. What does it mean? Globally speaking, we will have less nitrogen available for the growth of proteolytic bacteria. Because proteolytic bacteria are mainly pathogens, like E. coli, Salmonella, Clostridium, all these nice company. Okay, that means more security. Another impact, and we use it a lot for sows, especially in the middle of gestation, is the impact on behavior. Controlling the fiber quality, you can completely change, you can act on the behavior of the animal. Mainly because you will be able, and we already spoke about this morning, you will create satiation and satiety. That will completely limit the stress of the animal, decrease the global requirement because the physical activity will be lower. Okay. Especially for piglets, we play on the fiber to change the feed intake, to help for a better regulation of the feed intake, to have something regular that will also lead to a regular filling of the stomach, leading to a regular emptying of the stomach, and then protein digestibility will be better, and the risk of proteolytic development, bacterial development, lower. This also has been treated this morning. This is obvious, but very important, of course, is when you use fiber, especially at the end of the gestation, it's also something visible in the farm. You will have less sows, suffering from belly pain. You will have less sows just lying like this. And mainly because you avoid constipation, mainly because the fermentation inside are different and more control, and then more quiet animal. They will have a better, let's say, sleep or rest before this farrowing event, leading to a better farrowing process. What's happened on the, let's say, glycemia, glucose content, and in the same time, insulinemia. So here we give the feed to the sows, and we have two types of diet. One is a starch type diet, let's say soybean corn diet, and the other one is a right balance, let's say soluble insoluble diet, not that high. And you can see that the glycemia is completely different. Completely different. With the starch, you have a peak. Whenever you are increasing, it's okay. For my farmer, we call it the McDonald effect. When you take one McDonald, okay, it's half an hour after it's okay. 1 hour after you want another one. It's the same for the sow. When it goes down, here there's more physical activity, more social interaction, more stress. If you look to the right balance in fiber, you have something more regular, but especially here, you will have quite a constant value of glucose in the blood. And this morning, the first presentation spoke about this, especially around the farrowing. That makes a difference. Okay? If the farrowing appears here, there is no glucose in the blood. So it will be difficult to do the effort. Here, you still have glucose in the blood. And in the same time, look at the insulinemia. And we know how insulin is important in the, let's say, global hormonal evolution. And using the right quality of fiber is a very efficient way to play on also on hormones. And to finish on this, health impact coming from microbiota, okay? We spoke again this morning, we spoke about torsion, we spoke about ulcers. Using fiber is a quite easy way, speaking about particle size and composition, to avoid. It's also a way to control oxidative stress. We have trials showing that using the right fiber decrease the oxidative stress. Gut health we already spoke about. Increase the gut barrier protection, and for us it's a way to prepare the weaning time, playing on a huge mucus production before the weaning in order to be able to face all the stresses, all the trouble coming from the weaning and the decrease of feed intake. And so then we have an impact on the inflammation rate, and directly linked to this, of course, the nutritional cost. And how it works on immunity, I will go on this one first. Okay, so here we are in the lumen, let's say. We have some non-nutrient diet, okay, that will feed the microbial ecosystem, okay, and depending if it's mainly non-digestible protein, depending if it's non-digested protein, or depending if it's a fermentable fiber, we will have different, let's say, message given to specific sensor, leading to, okay, immune reaction, local but also global. Okay, and then sometime we also have some animals that will react of this. When you increase the inflammation rate, most of the time the first consequence is a decrease in the feed intake. Okay, and here is the epithelium cell, small intestine. First level of protection is this mucus layer, which is very important because it's a way to make a dilution to metabolite, and then the message given to those, let's say, nerve cells from those sensors, specific sensor, will be more clear. That's the way fiber help to control and to decrease inflammation rate. Okay, so using the right balance of a fiber, we have impact on the stomach. Okay, so we will play on the stomach distension. We will play on the gastric acid production, HCl. We will play on the water holding capacity, and depending on the balance between soluble and insoluble, that soluble that will decrease the retention time, and insoluble that will increase it. So you can play on those two in order to control it. And again, for piglets, something very important, and you don't need a high level to be able to control it. On the intestine. So in the intestine, especially in the large one, we will have, depending on the oxygen content, we will have the fermentation, proteolytic or cellulolytic. Again, we will have this water holding capacity, and because we will have a release of glucose very delayed from the feed intake, can be 4, 5, 6, 7 hours later, we'll have this glycemia modulation, and then we'll have an impact on the behavior, globally speaking, and especially the feeding impact. So if we come back to accurate nutrition, and if we come back to the sow cycle, I can just show which kind of fiber property we focus on depending on the period. For example, for gilts, I told you it's becoming one of the more important feed in the farm for gilts. We will try to play first on behavior. We want quiet gilts. We want gilts that will be, let's say, sleeping. We want to develop the digestive tract, especially the stomach. We want to develop immunity. We will invest on vaccination for those gilts. The cost is quite high, and one way to achieve a better vaccination yield is to control this microbiota. Okay, and of course, for the first estrus, we want also to improve the hormonal, let's say, response. First months of gestation, here we want to control the, let's say, homogeneity of the litter, and sometimes the EUGR, intrauterine growth retardation, impact. Fiber is a way It's not the only one, of course, using arginine, using antioxidant, using a lot of tools, but in this strategy, fiber is important. Avoiding ulcers, first months of gestation, avoiding inflammation. So we have specific requirement, speaking about fiber, in the first months of gestation. Second month of gestation, most of the time, maybe not for the very high prolific sows, but let's say for classical sows, we will play on fiber with a higher level in order to give them a lowest density feed, so less energy, less protein, just to cover the maintenance requirement, okay? And then we will play on the fiber mainly to achieve the right behavior. And also, of course, immunity. Last month of gestation, sometimes we have already catabolism. That means using protein from the body in order to cover the need and development of the udder, development of the fetus. And we use fiber, part of the strategy, to limit oxidative stress. We use also fiber in order to limit heterogeneity of the litter. We use fiber to improve the stomach volume, and it's a beginning of, let's say, the work to completely avoid constipation and preparing the colostrum, the pre-immunoglobulin, so playing on immunity. When we have a pre-farrowing feed, okay, we spoke about this morning, the list is longer. Stomach volume, no constipation, immunity, preparation of the colostrum, preparation of the farrowing process, and also preparation of the first piglet contamination. And in lactation, so first week we'll try to play on the glycemia. It could be quite useful. And the second part, fiber will be important in order to play on the ovocyte maturity for the next litter. One way to control homogeneity, especially when the sows are using a lot of protein coming from the body. Just some idea of the balance, just to show you, don't keep the value in mind, because the value I show here are completely linked to the matrix description. So if you focus on this and you apply this with not the same matrix, there is no sense. Just to show you that it's a dynamic evolution. We don't have the same ratio between soluble and insoluble in the second part of gestation compared to the first part, and not the same compared to lactation. Dynamic composition. The same for piglets to fatteners. Okay, in the crib feed, it's difficult to put fiber in the crib feed, but it's very important because it's maybe the only way to let's say to keep regular the flora coming from the first contamination. The milk is perfect to protect the microbiota of the piglet, but it's not good to protect the cellulolytic flora. So if we don't feed the piglet with small amount of fermentable fiber, you will not be able to protect and feed this flora. And this flora is very important to achieve a low antibiotic strategy around weaning. So that's why for our company it's a 5 day before weaning, 3 days after weaning. We have a very specific fiber strategy in order to overexpress the gut barrier before the weaning. We want a very high mucus layer. That means the digestibility will not be good, but we don't care. That means after the weaning, here, we will not have the same level of damages coming from the stresses of weaning. And the same for the fatteners. It's also a way, and sometimes we forget about fiber. Small amount but right amount are quite important, especially on the grower phase, in order, again, to keep this microbiota balance and avoid all the, let's say, diarrhea and eubiosis. Just to show you that the evolution of the information, of the data, nutrient, soluble, insoluble, is not the same. It's also kind of a dynamic one. And that's why it's important to have a range of feed sufficiently high. For example, not to have a high fiber strategy for a too long time, just to be able to focus on this specific period. Okay, so take-home message to conclude. So, fermentable and non-fermentable fiber open really new fields of application, both for nutrition but also health. I'm convinced that our job of nutritionist is changing. Now, from the choice you will make in your diet, in your feed, from raw material, from functional ingredient, you will also play on immunity, you will also play on health. It's something quite new. Both, okay, for sows and piglet, we can isolate very specific period where the, let's say, fiber composition should be very specific, and then we'll have benefits from this. On the sows, the impact on piglet quality is very high. We used to focus on PSY, which is for me not the right factors. Piglet quality is very important, and the cost of a bad quality is very high in the farm. Of course. So the right strategy in the fiber composition is the way to control the piglet quality. Speaking about immaturity, speaking about homogeneity, but also speaking about immunity from the right beginning of the piglet's life. Without accuracy, if you want to use fiber and increase the level of fiber without accuracy, maybe you will increase uncertainty. With fiber, there is no place for, let's say, no accuracy, because the consequences of bad control of the fiber composition can be very high. First one, digestibility. We want to have a digestibility as good as possible. So if you don't control, especially with classical raw material, if you don't control the fiber value, digestibility can be irregular. Impact on pathogen development. And soluble fiber, fermentable fiber, classical one, can have impact also on pathogen. We did this mistake in the past with, for example, with the brown sugar beet pulp, with no control, and we were facing diarrhea, and it was mainly because our fiber description was not accurate enough. Of course, we are looking for a better immunity, but if you don't control the mycotoxin content, it's not the right objective. So that also, if you don't control your fiber quality, you can have also a lot of problem coming from mycotoxin, and you know what it is. And if you don't control the fiber, you also can have an impact on heat increment. So as a nutritionist, we don't really like fiber because it's a kind of risk. To control it, to be able to have a low level of fiber but accurate one and control one, is a way to take the best from fiber. So establishing the fiber strategy is not easy. It's not easy. To my point of view, we must mix several sources in order to limit uncertainty. But the ideal is to find this central component with no mycotoxin, regularity in the value, low particle size, and specific fermentation metabolite. So this is it. I will say thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you very much.